you get your teeth checked every 6 months, get them checked and cleaned. Isn't our brain just as important? I would say more important, but we don't. We don't as a culture. And I think it's a cultural movement to start looking at mental health as, hey, how do we help create mental wellness?
Stay tuned. Coming up, it's part 2 of our discussion with Dr. Donnie, talking about the health and wellness qualities that make for successful first responders at work and at home. Hello and welcome to the Situational Awareness Matters Show, episode 366. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. Today's feature segment is sponsored by Gassaway Virtual Training. There are 33 online training programs for you to choose from. Some of the programs are live events presented virtually, and some of them are pre-recorded programs. To learn more, visit samatters.com website and click on the Virtual Training tab. Okay, let's jump into our feature segment as we continue our discussion with Dr. Donnie Hutchinson from last week.
Sometimes I think you can be out of balance and you don't see that you are, or you're in denial that you are. So therefore, maybe that puts some blinders on you. So if someone had to step out of themselves and kind of look down from the corner of the room at themselves, what are some of the things that they might see in self-reflection that is a pretty good indicator that they've got a challenge with this balance in life?
Yeah, good, very good question. And there's a couple ways, and they can assess themselves. And I'll also share with you another way. They can go ask people. But if you assess yourself, you ask yourself, well, how am I physically? I mean, your annual physical is going to tell you a little bit about that. But are you overweight? Are you obese? Are you exercising the way it is generally understood the way you should in the firefighting industry? Are you eating somewhat of I don't mean to use the word balanced diet, but we know what I mean by that, right? Are we eating generally a nutritious meals regularly? Are we drinking too much? Or are we not drinking too much? Assessing our psychological. Are we having trouble sleeping at night because of all the chatter in our mind that we're thinking about and running through? And if so, are we getting help for that? Are we seeing a culturally competent therapist? Are we using our peer support team? Those type of things. And if you are, and if you're doing these things, you're probably feeling pretty well balanced. Socially, do you have any friends outside the fire service? Getting a different perspective on things outside of the fire service, just a different perspective by having some social circles outside of that. And then assess yourself, hey, where's my spirituality? I mean, maybe you were, I think a lot of people's spirituality has taken a dip. I can speak for myself during the pandemic, for me, not being able to go to church with my family, things like that. Even though it comes back, somewhat hesitant because of the, large crowds or things like that. But, just assessing that and then assessing your family relationships. Do you have the relationships that you want with your children? The types of relationships? Do you have the relationships with your spouse or significant other or anyone close that you want to, what's that relationship like? Because there's usually 2 degrees. There's this one thing that I work on. It's called, helping folks, firefighters, understand their current reality of exactly what the question you asked, Rich, is that where are they currently in this self-assessment? The other piece, though, is where do you desire to be? How do you want those relationships to be? How do you want your self-care to be? And if you're not sure, a lot of times people say, oh, I have a great relationship with my spouse and things like that. Well, maybe go ask him or her. Um, a friend of mine, well, friend of yours probably too. Yeah, Andy Starnes. I'll never forget. Andy told me on the show once. He goes, "Oh yeah, I thought things were going great." And my wife, she checked me. She goes, "You know what? You are a great provider, but you are being a rotten husband and father." It woke him up. And he made changes, because he was in that stage of his career where it was about providing, right? And and he shares that story, and it's beautiful because it's like, he had to get checked on that. And I think a lot of times that's what and I think we can do that for each other a little bit. We start thinking about, hey, having some real conversations with each other. And I don't mean hurtful, or derogatory or anything like that, but just real, hey man, how are things at home? Really, how are things at home? And sometimes you have to ask the same question about 10 times before you get the real answer. But I think that's one way that we can help each other, but then also just really honestly being honest with ourselves and assessing where are we at.
Is there a good way to start this conversation with a spouse? Because I would like to think that sometimes people that are out of balance realize they're out of balance, and they're afraid to ask the question because they know what the answer is going to be. So they don't want to ask the question because they don't want to confront that demon or have that conversation. So is there a way to gently enter this conversation that doesn't end up in conflict, or at least can take the fear of starting the conversation away from somebody who needs to have it but doesn't know how to start it?
Yes, good question. And where I have coached firefighters in this situation is that I first get down to, do they want to improve? They know they need to improve, but do they want to? And if you have a spirit of continuous improvement, and a lot of times, you think in your career, think about when you first became a firefighter. I mean, you learn and learn and learn. You never stop learning, do you, in your career? You're always improving. And why don't we take the exact same strategy and apply it to our personal relationships? And enter the conversation with, in the spirit of, I want to become a better spouse, husband, wife. Help me understand how I'm doing right now. And then, what is it that I'm doing well? What is it that you think maybe I can improve upon that would make you more happier, more satisfied? But I think that spirit of continuous improvement, hey, I want to be better at this. It works well. It does. And I think it lowers the bar of conflict because it's not, you're asking for some feedback. But be prepared when you ask for feedback, hopefully that's what you receive is good feedback. And then it's up to the individual. How do you want to handle that and manage it? And, that's that continuous improvement concept. Take those skills and strategies and tactics that you have used for so many years as a career firefighter or and in profession, and bring it to other areas of your life. And that's one of the things, Dr. Rich, that we often assess where we're always failing, don't we? I mean, we study it, but why don't we study where we're succeeding? Why don't we dissect these successes in our life we have a successful career. Well, let's dissect that, and then understand that situation. What are the causes of that? And then, wow, what else could this relate to? Hey, maybe I could apply this to my health. Maybe I could apply this to my family. It's all very similar,
Thank you. That was very insightful. When I think that many firefighters, for better or for worse, think they're really good at self-assessment, and they're really good at self-diagnosis, and they think they're really good at self-treatment. But at some point, being helped by a professional is quite appropriate. How do they know when what needs done exceeds their self-care limits? And then how do they find an appropriate professional to help them through, whatever? I mean, I think when it comes to physical health and wellness, I think it's easy to find if you want to go to the gym and find a trainer or get access to a nutritional support person, or even some websites, that help with, nutrition and meal planning and things like that. But, when it comes to family and relationship or psychological well-being, how do they realize this is exceeding my capabilities, I need help from somewhere else? And then how do they find that?
Yes. Well, that whole piece where the self-diagnosis and fixing it themselves and everything like that, unfortunately, a lot of times they don't realize it until it becomes a little too late and things are really starting to blow up. And then it's hard to, can be more challenging to fix. I know many firefighters that they have, they use different names, but whether they call it their ambassador group or their, basically it's half dozen guys or ladies or so that create a friendship. And I don't mean not necessarily your shift. I'm talking about, when you go to workshops or different things, seminars, you get to know people around the country, is that you create a group. And it can even be, and it's a group that I know many of them that, they text each other, they check in with each other. And it's a group that they understand the career, they understand the family, they understand the physical aspect, the mental aspect, they understand everything because they're all doing it. But it's a group where they can be honest with each other and they can share and learn from other experiences from others in this small group. But then that group, it seems like the ones that I've connected to, or I'm not involved, but I have learned about, is that group is going to be honest with each other, their own members of that group. They're going to be very honest with it. And sometimes that group could help that person say, you know what? Your self-assessment is not accurate. Here's how we're assessing you. Let's get some help. So I think that's an underutilized support group that I would love to see get a little bit more energy behind it. So more people form those type of things. And then of course you have your own, your peer support. What I say is that why are we waiting for a problem? We as in humans, firefighters, why do we wait for a problem in mental health before we decide to go treat it? Why aren't we talking to a culturally competent peer support person or therapist or coach or that? Why don't we do it as preventive? Help build our resiliency and make it just part of life's routine. Like, you get your teeth checked every 6 months, get them checked and cleaned. Isn't our brain just as important, I would say more important, but we don't. We don't as a culture. And I think it's a cultural movement to start looking at mental health as, hey, how do we help create mental wellness? And we all know if you want wellness in anything in life, relationships, physical health, mental health, you name it, you got to work at it. You don't work at it after you've crossed the finish line. You have to work at it from the start, So I think that could be a huge help, is that if we start looking at this, that, I want to start talking to someone or find some source, some pathway to where I can start working on things before they become unmanageable.
Do you think there's a stigma that needs to be somehow resolved? Like if I'm at work and somebody said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to go get my teeth cleaned, and then I'm going to go, do something with the family," versus, "Well, I've got an appointment in the morning with my therapist who's going to, help unclog the mess in my mind, and then I'm going to go do something with my family," that they somehow either are embarrassed by that. No one's embarrassed to say they're going to go get their teeth cleaned or a cavity filled or whatever. Mm-hmm. But there's some sense of self guilt, maybe the word, or embarrassment that you would actually need someone to help you in that area. And you got a pride factor there, and I don't think there's any firefighter thinks, "Well, I can fill my own cavities," but they probably think, I can fix my own mind issues. I'll just Google the solution or something, or watch a Facebook video or a YouTube video or something like that. How do we get past that stigma that we could be labeled? And I'm sure there's some that are afraid that they would be.
Oh yes. And unfortunately they would be, it's still out there. Absolutely. But I think, and maybe as a culture, we need to start, and I mean culture from a macro, our country culture, is that, maybe therapists, you start thinking, what are synonyms of therapists? Maybe it's I'm going for my wellness appointment, or I'm going for my wellness coach, or I'm how about that? Here's another piece I'm so passionate about, Rich, is that the field of positive psychology. It's only about a dozen years old, but when we think of therapists, right, and psychology, we think of one, there's a baseline. Here's average, what behavior should be like, or whatever our behavior should be like. And when we think of therapy, we're thinking of, okay, that is someone that's below average that is going to receive therapy to come up to average. That's the way we think. That's the way the industry has been. It is to help those that are not at the bar to reach the bar. A dozen years ago, positive psychology came out. Several guys. One of them is Martin Seligman, fantastic, out of UPenn, but they're about a guy out of Harvard, guy out of Claremont Graduate University. My daughter actually studied under. Is that it is so cool to where they said, "Hey, why aren't we studying the people that are at the bar, and how do they get to thrive? Why don't we start studying people that are thriving in life?" In that whole person, career, relationships, health, all that. And they created this field called positive psychology. It's so new, people haven't really thought about it, but they're all about thriving, wellness, flourishing in life. Hey, I'm going to go see my flourishing coach tomorrow and then spend time with the family. And maybe people would be like, "Flourishing coach? What's that about?" Or, "I'm doing my flourishing consultation. What's that about?" "Oh man, it's how to become the best version of myself in all areas of my life.
Yeah.
I'm working on being the best father. I'm working on being the best husband. I'm working on being the best to myself from health. I'm working on I want to be the best firefighter that I can be, which, we have the training here for that. But my flourishing coach, they help me get in the right frame of mind to where I want to flourish in all areas of my life. And I'm just psyched up about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just a change in terminology kind of just changes kind of like the mindset of what it means um, to reach out to someone. It's not like I'm underperforming in some area and I want to get up to average. I may be at average and I want to be exceptional. So like an excellence coach, exceptional performance coach, that's something that firefighters should be very familiar with. Those that are passionate about being the best that they can be on the job should see that there's value in having the opportunity for training, practice, development, and in these other areas. You had mentioned a couple of times now, culturally competent therapist. What does that mean?
That means when a firefighter goes to a therapy appointment and they share with them the experience they had that previous week, that they don't turn the therapist into falling out of their chair crying. It's a therapist that understands the industry. It's a therapist that understands the trauma that firefighters go through, and that a firefighter is not working to educate the therapist, because most therapists, they don't hear these type of issues. And so culturally competent, they've taken time to understand the industry. They've taken time to study. They've taken time to Q&A, really get involved with firefighters and have a pretty good understanding and knowledge of what you see, what you experience. The incidents are different, but dead bodies are dead bodies and critically injured are critically injured. And so I think it's important, because what happens is, and that takes us back to the older days of EAP programs, where people would go to EAP and, the therapist would end up needing therapy after the session.
I had, that's a great, great example. I had a department once that I was invited in. They'd had an incident where a firefighter died, and the invitation for me to come in was not for like post-incident stress debrief, but rather it was to help to use any other term, thin slice the incident, put it in slow motion, and kind of figure out how it happened, why it happened, and how not to have something like that happen again. So we're looking at command and communications and equipment and training and dispatch and the interconnectivity of all of it. So really quite operational. But during that conversation, I had one of the firefighters say to me, they shortly after the incident, they had gotten the firefighters connected with the EAP program, and the EAP people came out. They didn't have to make an appointment and go see them. They came out to the fire station, and this firefighter said, I was talking with this therapist or counselor, and he said, and I mentioned something that happened at the incident that was pretty important to the outcome, the tragic outcome. And he said, and I'm just kind of laying it all out there, like putting my heart out on my sleeve. And he says, and this person says, well, wait a minute. What does that mean when you guys do that? I mean, they were so unaware of just even the very basics of what these firefighters do on the job. And that caused this firefighter then to, in a very frustrated way, say, you really have no clue. And they got up and walked out of that session because they told me, as you're saying, I'm here for help. I'm not here to teach you what we do on our job. In fact, it's more frustrating for me to assume the role of being a teacher for you than to have you be a therapist for me. So that example of culturally competent is so important, so that a firefighter feels like this person really understands what I deal with on a daily basis. I mean, I don't know that the therapist has to have served as a firefighter, but I think the therapist should be well versed in what firefighters or police officers or EMS, what they do on the front line that gives them a source of credibility to be a good listener and a good dispenser of advice. I think if I had to go, I have not been in the position that firefighter had been in, but if I had somebody die and I went to talk to somebody about it and they were clueless as to what I do for a living and how that all played out, I think that probably make me more angry than I would see it as being helpful, especially if they try to I don't know what would be the word. Geez, I'm struggling for the word. If they try to patronize me by saying, "Oh yeah, I know exactly how you feel." No, you don't.
You're right.
No,
Yeah.
you don't. Have you ever, retrieved the body of one of your fallen comrades,
Right.
from a shooting or a fire or a domestic issue that went bad? Have you ever? Because if you never have, you don't really know exactly how I feel. So that culturally competent is pretty important. Is there a way to vet that for somebody who wants to get some help, or an excellence coach to know if somebody's actually been around the block, or if it's just somebody that's hung a shingle out on their
Yeah. You can try to do some of your own vetting and by, asking questions. And is a therapist willing to talk off billable time, if you will, right? Are they culturally competent? Well, tell me how. What's your association? How many firefighters have you worked with? But usually, though, one of the better ways is word of mouth in your own community. Start asking. Even if it's if you would ask a law enforcement officer, who are they using? If they say, "Oh, well, I'm using this therapist or this, wellness coach or life coach or different things like that," and they say, "Hey, I'm using this one." There you have different jobs, but you're at the similar scenes. You're at the scene together, and there's a lot of relationship there. And then there are some other programs, some I think national outfits that are starting to do the vetting and sort of before they place them on their quote culturally competent list, they do that vetting for you. I don't have any specific examples of that, off the top of my head, but I know I've come across those. But could you imagine though, if a therapist walked into when you're, chief of a department and things like that, and they said, "You know what? Could I spend some time with you guys? Could I do some ride along, spend some time at the kitchen table, hear the chatter? I just want to do it to learn. I want to become more familiar." Would you have welcomed that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because then they become quite the resource,
Yeah.
a trusted resource and a valued resource, because their immersion gives them a perspective that they otherwise would only know from television.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, every time I go away for a workshop, I ask if I can do a ride along. It's like the experiences both on fire and law enforcement have just been phenomenal of understanding, and I think anyone that's really, if you really want to serve this industry, get yourself any type of provider. We need to get ourselves involved and truly understand, because I think, knowledge, it's great, to have that hands-on, experience, and being in the scene and things like that is so helpful. And I think there's an upward trend of this too, Rich, is that there are more and more therapists that are wanting to become culturally competent, I believe.
Well, this might be a nice wrap toward the closure. You do workshops, half-day workshops on work-life balance for first responders. What's the approach that you would use in a program, and what would be an example of a good takeaway for firefighters who might attend a workshop?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you asking me about that. Is that, and I've been very excited. Last couple of weeks, I was in Arizona and California doing live in-person workshops.
California allowed that?
Certain counties do, not all of California. Yep. We had 20. We had 20. And since I'm fully vaccinated, I was completely comfortable, for myself and things like that. And they were all too. But, with the workshop, my workshops are in a 3-step process. Is that I use that current reality. So earlier in the program here today we talked about, different assessments. So I take firefighters through a series of different reflection exercises and assessments. And we have a lot of discussion too, small group discussion, larger group discussion. But I get them to understand, and they have a workbook in this workshop that they're writing in. And they're writing about their priorities, who's important to them, what's important to them. And I get them to assess their current reality. As I tell them, it is what it is. No judgment here. It's current reality. And then I take them to step 2, over to that desired future. How would you like things to be in your life? Everything from your career to your family, to your health, mental health, physical health, everything, spirituality. How do you desire it? And then the 3rd step, and they document all that down in their workbook. And this is their book. It's their book they take home to use. And then one of the things I always I preach about, people hear me say it often, is that I say, knowledge is powerful only when joined with execution. You need to take this new knowledge, you got to put it into action. So the 3rd step is to build this tactical project plan. If you say you want to have a closer relationship with your spouse, that's one of your objectives. There's a national marriage study out that says, people that have regular date nights, and it doesn't mean every Friday night, but just, consistency, if you will. They do have closer relationships, better communication, more intimacy. And, I tell people, well, who doesn't want that with their spouse? It's everything. And I say, if you want a date, then that goes on that project plan. What's the first step? Ask her or him out on a date, go to dinner, and then execute it. And then I give them places to where, well, how did that make you feel? And so it's truly a tactical plan to where you take point A, where you want to be, current reality. Where do you want to go is point B, desired future. And then we build a plan to get you from point A to point B. And the biggest takeaway for them is that they leave with this plan of action. And those that want to touch base with me, sometimes we set up some calls, do a Zoom call. Sometimes they just have a quick question on email. Sometimes, I'll be checking back in with them. Hey, you said you're going to call your adult daughter that's, lives away from home now. You said you were going to contact her every other night. How you doing on that, Rich? They'll get pinged from me periodically of things that I remember what people share with me. And it's all about discovering, for them to rediscover their priorities and now align their behaviors with those priorities.
Thank you. We had originally got connected on your podcast show. So, and then I thought it would be good to have you as a guest on my show. So let's take a moment and talk about what your show is, what it's about, and why would somebody want to subscribe and listen to the Get Balanced show?
Well, I appreciate it. Yes, the Get Balance with Dr. Donnie It's all about what I do is I interview, similar to you, is that I interview firefighters and law enforcement. And what we do is generally I'm interviewing people that are doing pretty good with their balance. However, they not always did. They generally have had to overcome something, because none of us are perfect. We get out of balance, but they have some formulas, some secrets for their success, and I think it's a program to encourage firefighters, first responders, that it truly is possible to create success and effectiveness at home and work and in all areas of your life. And the show is about helping listeners, so that they don't have the frame of mind like that one guest you were speaking of on the program, to where they said, I would run into the burning building knowingly that I will not come out, just because I want to put forth the effort to save the person. And because family doesn't come first, essentially what we want to do on the program, Rich, is I want people to learn to not have any new regrets in life. We all have past regrets. Most of us need to learn and practice self-forgiveness, a skill that is very difficult sometimes. But I think it's about no new regrets and helping people get re-engaged or rediscover their priorities in life. That's what the show's about. And I usually tell it through some successful stories, and enjoying it, every week that I do. And then every fifth episode or so, I do one all by myself, and usually it's just a little mini talk, a little lesson plan, if you will. I put the teacher's hat on. It's like, hey, I'm going to talk to you about, work-life conflicts that are very common with people. And I just do a little lesson on it about every fifth episode to try to consistently try to educate listeners on something that may help them.
And where would they find the show?
Yeah. Well, my website, they can get a lot of information, which is DonnieHutchinson.com, as well as the show is out there on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, all the major ones carry the show.
Okay. Is there anything you'd want to share with the audience that you didn't get a chance to share because I didn't ask you the right question?
Yeah. No, actually, I really appreciate your questions. And I think, it's very, very helpful. And we have a lot in common. A lot of us that are in this industry of speaking and doing workshops, is that we're all working on wellness a lot of times in different lanes, if you will, and with that common goal, right? We want that whole person to be successful in all areas of their lives. You're protecting them, teaching them how to protect themselves on the fire ground, the big area, the big dangerous area. But then we have all these other areas. And I felt like, situational awareness matters. And then I started reading more about it and started reading some of your articles and studying you a little bit. And I'm like, wow, can we apply this to our whole life? Not just the fire ground? Mm-hmm. What would that look like? And what would those results be?
Yeah. And that's really what inspired me to have you on as a guest, is to see that connection. I had been so focused on essay, incident scene essay. And then when I was the guest on your show, I kind of, as I told you, I had an enlightenment that there is a broader application to this topic in other aspects of life other than just, in that chaotic first, 10 to 30 minutes on an incident scene, that there's other applications for this message. And I would thank you for kind of enlightening me and allowing me to see that broader view of the importance of the topic and the need to have that balance, that faith, family, career, health balance. So Donnie, thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your passion for this topic. And I encourage the listeners and viewers to swing by Dr. Donnie's website, and I'll put a link in the show notes to that. And subscribe to his podcast. And I would also think that it would be very helpful if you bought a copy of his book, although we're not here. This isn't a book promotion podcast episode, but the book is there, and I'm sure it's quite helpful in helping responders find that balance, and contains a lot more than we had the opportunity to talk about in this short interview. So thank you, Donnie, for being with me.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Rich. And I'll tell you, I love all of your work. I appreciate the friendship that we are developing and the similarities. You know, we come from two different worlds, but boy, it's interesting how the paths are so cross and the interests are there. And all the work that you do of helping save people, teaching them the incident scenes, the situational awareness is just tremendous. And I thank you for all that you do as well.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you again to Dr. Donnie for sharing your wisdom with us. Since the start of the pandemic, I've had some amazing opportunities to present my programs to virtual audiences ranging in size from 6 to 400, with recorded playbacks being viewed over 26,000 times. Here's hoping that the vaccines reduce the number of cases and return us back to some form of normalcy. Here's what I have upcoming in training at this point of the game. On April 9th, I'll be presenting a live, in-person situational awareness program for the Kansas State Firefighters Association Conference in Mulvane, Kansas. And thank you to the Kansas State Firefighters Association for bringing me back multiple times over the course of the years. I really appreciate your support. April 12th, I'll be facilitating the Minnesota Virtual Training Series. This program will feature Chief Jerry Strike talking about difficult people and their organizational impacts. April 18th, I'll be presenting a virtual program on training for failure for the Alberta Fire Training Officers Association. April 26th, I'll be facilitating the Minnesota Virtual Training Series. This program will feature John Kriesel talking about how he lost both his legs in an IED explosion in Iraq and how he was managed through the impact of that event. On May 2nd, I'll be presenting a live, in-person situational awareness training program for the Hilltop Hose Company just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. On May 10th, I'll be facilitating the Minnesota Virtual Training Series, this featuring Randy Kern talking about how to have an effective conflict coaching conversation to improve performance. On May 15th, I'll be doing a program for an electric energy company and their line foreman in California. On May 25th, I'll be facilitating the Minnesota Virtual Training Series, this program featuring Peggy Young talking about Strength Finders. On May 26th, I'll be presenting a live, in-person situational awareness program for the Utah Fire Chiefs Association in Salt Lake City, Utah. And thank you to the Utah Fire Chiefs Association for now bringing me back multiple times over the course of years. I appreciate that support. Thank you to the organizations that have allowed me to offer your members virtual training, and a special thanks to the agencies who've postponed their training in 2020 and are patiently waiting to reschedule. If you're interested in hosting a virtual program or a live event, just click on the Contact Us tab at the top of the samatters.com homepage, and I will give you a call. Finally, remember to check the show notes for how to subscribe to our newsletter and how to follow us on social media. There we share ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 366 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you again to my guest, Dr. Donnie Hutchinson. Thank you to our viewers and listeners for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters Show with Dr. Richard Gassaway. If you're interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit his website, samatters.com. If you're interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for a program, or if you would like to be a guest on his show, click the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage.